Hello, class. This will be the second recorded lecture for Chapter 4, which talks about linear regression analysis in the statistical world. And so the idea is that in the first lecture, we introduced the idea of a linear equation and talked about it algebraically. And so now what we're going to do is take a look at data, statistical data, and try to model it using a linear equation. And the first thing we're going to do is introduce this technique called scatter plot. And so what a scatter plot is actually just not random, it's just a plot of the data. And so if you look in the book, they call it scatter plots for bivariate data. Bivariate is just a fancy word for analysis with two variables. Bi means two. So what we're going to analyze is data from a real estate agent who's studying the size of a home and its selling price. And you would expect that the bigger the size, the more it's going to sell for. So basically, they're taking a look at some data and trying to have some sort of correlation with regard to the data. So here's what the data looks like. And this right to the right of that is what a scatter plot is. So our first column, square feet, is going to be the horizontal or the X variable, right, in our axis here. And the second is the selling price of the house. That will be our vertical or Y variable. And basically, when you plot this, you just generate your scale, which is sometimes a little bit tricky because you want a nice view of the data. So you can see that our lowest value is 2521 for X. So we started at 2400, right? And it looks like our lowest value here was 4000 for Y. So we went to 38. And you could see, you could do the same thing on the high end as well. So you can see that the data gets plot. Let's take just one of these data points here. Here, Y equals 400, and then X would be 2521. And so you just plot them. So what do you see here? Well, the one thing that you see is that the trend is upward, right? Which would imply a positive trend or a positive slope, meaning as the value, as the square foot goes up, the value of the home goes up with it. So they follow each other in that direction. So you can do this by hand. Highly do not recommend that. For those of you that have the cool calculator, you could use the calculator. And in this sense, you plug in into the matrix where L1 is the X variable. So that would be square foot. And L2 would be the output variable or the Y variable. And that would be the price of the house. And then you go and you do second, Y, and then hit scatter plot, and it would look like that. And you can see here that we have a positive relationship between the value of the home and the size of the home. So as the value goes up, the size goes up, and if the size goes down, then the value goes down as well. I would recommend getting used to the spreadsheet for this application. It is much more user-friendly, and the ability to be able to do more calculations, you'll see when we do predictions, will be very, very useful. So I already did one. I did it here, but let me just delete it and do it for you again. And so the idea is we want to put a graph on here. And if you remember from the bar charts, what we want to do is go to insert, and you can see we have these recommended charts right here in the center. The last one with all the dots is a scatter or bubble chart. And so we're going to click the first one here, which is scatter. So let me highlight the data. And then you go and you hit scatter. And here's what the scatter plot looks like. So the one little caveat is that if you want the scales to be set up, you have to sometimes set them up so you can see the data a little bit better. You can leave it this way if you want, but I'd recommend scaling the data by, or excuse me, changing the scale so you can see the data a little more. So again, let's just pick some numbers here. So let's look at the x-axis first. And so 3,500 is a good place to stop, all right? But what about the minimum? Well, the minimum is 2,521, it looks like. So why don't we stop at 2,000? So we're going to spread this out horizontally. So how to do that? You go to this plus, and the first one is axes. So you click the arrow for axes, and then you click more options. And then up comes these. And so if you click this axis options, you'll see that you can do horizontal and vertical. So let's do the horizontal first. And so we're going to stay with the same max, but we're going to change the minimum from 0 to 2,000. Boom. See how it changed horizontally? See it a little bit better. So how do you do vertically? Well, you go hit the axes option again, and you go to the vertical axis. And now you can see you have the minimum and maximum. Maximum of 600, that would be okay. Yeah. We could change that maybe to 550. And the minimum of 0 is too small. Why don't we change that to 350? Because the minimum looks like it's 400, right? So let's go to 350. And so you can see we spread it out now in the vertical direction. So you can see you have a little bit more granularity of where the points are. And I think that they're just easier to see. So that ends this recorded lecture for the scatter plot application and the regression analysis. The next thing we're going to talk about is this idea of correlation coefficient.